There's a reason why some of the most unforgettable people you've ever met were Scorpios. They don't just walk into your life, they carve themselves into your memory. And yet, behind that magnetic presence, behind the eyes that seem to see straight through your soul, lies a truth that few are willing to face. Scorpios lie. Not all the time, not in obvious ways, but when they do, it's never casual. Their lies are not lightweight. They are forged, deliberate, precise, often painful. But here's the twist. Scorpio doesn't lie the way others do. Not to charm, not to gain popularity, not to save face. Scorpio lies to protect something sacred, to guard a wound, to expose your real face, or sometimes to bury their own truth before it destroys them. And let me be brutally honest, this scares people. It challenges everything we think we know about trust, honesty, and morality. That's why Scorpio gets labeled manipulative, secretive, two-faced. But what if, just what if, they're not hiding darkness but guarding a deeper light? You see, Scorpio's world isn't black and white. It's layers of shadow and flame. In their realm, truth can be weaponized, and so can silence. That's why when they lie, it's not a move of cowardice. It's a spiritual calculation. Today, we're not here to judge the lie. We're here to understand it. Because once you do, you'll realize that every Scorpio lie carries a message. Some are shields, some are tests, some are warnings, but all of them reveal more than they conceal. So if you're ready to descend into the psyche of the zodiac's most feared truthbender, if you're bold enough to confront not just Scorpio, but your own relationship to deception, then let's begin. These are 12 reasons why Scorpios lie in specific situations, not for cruelty, but for clarity, power, and soul preservation. And by the time you reach the last one, you might not only forgive a Scorpio, you might realize you've lied for the same reasons too. Reason 1. When truth could destroy someone's soul. Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, the god of the underworld of death and rebirth. They know better than anyone that truth in its rawest form can either set you free or shatter you beyond repair. Unlike other signs who might use honesty as a virtue to boast about, Scorpio doesn't see truth as inherently good. They see it as a sacred tool, one that must be wielded carefully, like a scalpel in the hands of a surgeon. Sometimes the patient is too fragile. Sometimes the wound runs too deep. And in those moments, Scorpio lies. But not to harm, to protect. Let me tell you a story. There was once a woman named Cassandra. She was a Scorpio, quiet but perceptive and deeply loyal. Her best friend Melissa had fallen in love with a man charming, charismatic, but with secrets dripping from his smile. Cassandra had seen him before, in places he shouldn't be. She knew things about him that would make Melissa collapse. Affairs, lies, a second life. And yet, when Melissa turned to her, eyes glowing with joy, talking about rings and children and forever, Cassandra said nothing. She lied. She smiled, nodded, and said, "I'm happy for you. Now stop. Ask yourself, was that betrayal? Or was that mercy?" Because here's what you didn't know: Melissa had just recovered from a suicide attempt. Her entire emotional stability rested on this new relationship. If Cassandra had told her then, in that moment, she wouldn't have saved her. She would have broken her completely. Scorpios are often placed in impossible moral dilemmas like this, and they make their decision not from ego, but from soul-level calculations. They weigh damage. They read people. They protect the psyche the way a mother would protect a child in a burning house, pulling them away from what's real, just to give them a chance to breathe. And yes, they carry the guilt alone. What many people misunderstand is that Scorpio doesn't lie for convenience. They lie for impact and often for timing. Telling the truth is not just about the what, but the when. And Scorpios are masters of sensing when the human heart is ready to face something, and when it's not. They don't see truth as something to prove. They see it as something to preserve. So if you've ever confronted a Scorpio for hiding something, and they responded with silence, detachment, or misdirection, it may not have been cowardice. It may have been them protecting you from a truth that, at that time, could have burned your soul alive. Lesson: not all lies are meant to deceive. Some are meant to delay the destruction. Sometimes silence is wisdom. Sometimes waiting is love. We live in a culture that worships brutal honesty. Just say it. Be real. Don't hide the truth. But not all souls are ready for the whole truth at once, and not all hearts can handle the same dose of reality at the same time. Scorpio knows this. They've seen what truth can do when dropped like a bomb, so instead they lie like a bandage, not to cover the wound forever, but to give it time to stop bleeding. If you've ever told someone you're okay when you were breaking inside, or stayed silent about someone's betrayal just to protect someone you loved, then you've already walked in Scorpio's footsteps. The only difference? They do it with full awareness and carry the weight of every word they didn't say. Reason 2. When they're testing your loyalty. When a Scorpio tells you something that doesn't quite add up, pause. Don't rush to correct them. Don't call them out, because there's a good chance you're being tested. Scorpios aren't just interested in what you say. They're watching how you react when things don't make sense. They want to know, are you here for who they truly are, or for who you think they are? Will you speak behind their back, or will you hold your ground even when things feel unclear? You see, Scorpios don't give trust easily. They don't offer their inner world like a menu in a restaurant. They hand you a puzzle piece by piece, and sometimes that puzzle is delivered with a lie. But here's the shocking truth. It's not a lie to deceive. It's a lie to reveal. Let me explain with a story. There was a man named Jordan. He was a Scorpio, intelligent, mysterious, and always 5 steps ahead. He had a new coworker named Eli, who seemed friendly enough. Too friendly, always asking questions, eager to know more about Jordan's life. Jordan smiled and casually dropped a fake detail. Yeah, my uncle owns the company. Of course it wasn't true. But it didn't matter, because within a week, Jordan started hearing the whispers around the office. Jordan's got connections. He's protected. Careful what you say around him. Eli had failed the test. He didn't keep it to himself. He ran with it, exaggerated it, spread it. And in that moment, Jordan knew this person wasn't trustworthy. Not because of what he said, but because of what he did with something Jordan never meant seriously. That's how Scorpios operate. They'll hand you a glass of smoke and watch what you do with it. If you exaggerate, gossip, or use their words against them, they withdraw. Not with rage, not with drama, just silence. You've been weighed, measured, and dismissed. But if you hold their trust gently, if you don't run your mouth, even when things seem off, Scorpio notices that too. They may never say it, but inside a seed is planted. You just passed one of their most important spiritual tests. Lesson: loyalty isn't about what you say. It's about what you do when no one's watching. Scorpios don't want blind followers. They want warriors beside them. People who value privacy, silence, and discretion. People who don't panic when something feels off. People who wait, who listen, who prove themselves not with words, but with loyalty under pressure. Their lies aren't random. They're revelations in disguise. So next time a Scorpio says something strange, don't react. Observe, because while you think you're figuring them out, they're already 3 moves ahead, deciding whether you belong in their inner circle or outside the gates. Reason 3. When their pain is too deep to explain. There's a lie that every Scorpio has told at least once in their life. 3 little words, uttered with a soft smile, a straight spine, and eyes that hide a universe of storms. I'm doing fine. But it's not true. Inside, something may be shattering. They might be grieving a silent death, of a dream, a love, a version of themselves they buried in the night. But Scorpio doesn't bleed in public. They bury. Because the truth? Their pain is not for everyone. It's sacred. It's too vast for language. Too intense for casual empathy. And so they lie. Not to deceive, but to shield. Let me take you into a real story. Her name was Nyla, a Scorpio woman, 34, therapist by profession, intuitive by nature. People came to her to be healed, to cry, to confess, to unravel. But no one ever asked her how she was doing. One day, she got a call that her estranged father had passed.
No funeral, no reconciliation.
Just gone. At work the next day, a client asked how she was. She smiled and said, "Doing fine." In that moment, it wasn't about bravery. It was about containment. Scorpios feel emotions like tidal waves, but they rarely show them unless they've found a person or a space that's earned the right to witness them. And that right? It's earned through loyalty, depth, consistency. So when they say, "I'm fine," it's not a lie to reject connection. It's a coded message. I'm not ready, and you're not the one. In a world that prizes emotional openness, Scorpios are often labeled as cold, aloof, even secretive. But what many don't understand is this. They're not withholding because they lack emotion. They're withholding because they feel everything too deeply. Scorpios have scars they'll never show. And some wounds, they don't even have names. They exist in a spiritual dimension, in dreams, in memories passed down through generations. To explain them would be to relive them, and sometimes survival requires silence. So they lie. They say they're okay, and they keep walking. Lesson: not every lie is meant to hide. Some are meant to protect what's sacred. We live in a world that demands vulnerability on demand. Speak your truth, they say. Open up. But for Scorpios, truth is not something to throw into the wind. It's something to protect, to guard, to honor. When they lie about their pain, they are not being fake, they're creating a boundary, a spiritual perimeter. Because once a Scorpio lets someone in, they let them all the way in. And that level of exposure can be dangerous for both sides. If you love a Scorpio, don't take "I'm fine" at face value. Learn to read the silence, the stillness, the shift in their energy. Be patient, because if and when they finally tell you the truth, it means you've entered a place few ever reach. And what you find there won't just be their pain, it'll be their soul. Reason 4. When they're protecting someone else's secret. Not all lies are told for personal gain. Some are told to protect someone else's soul. And no sign understands this spiritual responsibility more than Scorpio. You see, Scorpio is ruled by Pluto, the planet of death, transformation, and sacred contracts. Scorpios understand the gravity of a vow, a secret, a confession whispered in the dark. And when someone trusts them with truth too heavy to carry alone, Scorpio doesn't flinch. They absorb it. They become its keeper, its guardian, even if it costs them, even if they have to lie to protect it. Let me tell you about Darius, a Scorpio man, 42, former military intelligence officer, now a high school counselor. One day, a student came to him in tears. A girl, 17, had just learned that her older brother, a local police officer, was struggling with addiction and suicidal thoughts. She begged Darius, "Please don't tell anyone. I just needed to say it to someone who won't destroy him." He made a silent vow in that moment. 2 weeks later, the school principal confronted Darius about rumors involving the officer. Darius looked her in the eye and said, "I haven't heard anything like that." It was a lie, but it was also an act of honor. Because Scorpio doesn't believe in betraying someone's pain for the sake of convenience, or even social rules. If they've been trusted with something sacred, they'll guard it like a priest guards confession. And yes, that includes lying to protect what was never theirs to expose. To the world, that might seem dangerous, irresponsible even, but to a Scorpio, it's code, it's duty. Scorpio understands that some secrets are bigger than truth. They know that sometimes a person needs time, safety, and a shield from public judgment to survive. So they lie, not to protect the sin, but to protect the soul that's trying to heal beneath it. Lesson: sometimes protecting a secret is an act of sacred loyalty. Scorpio's lies are rarely selfish. They are shields forged in silence, held in place by unshakable loyalty. In a world obsessed with exposing the truth, with posting every detail online, with cancel culture and public humiliation, Scorpio takes the opposite path. They go inward. They guard. They wait. Because they know that true transformation often requires privacy. That confession without compassion is just cruelty. And that some people survive only because someone else chose to lie. Not for them, but for their journey. So if you've ever wondered why a Scorpio stayed quiet when they could have exposed everything, maybe it's because they weren't protecting the lie. Maybe they were protecting the person who trusted them enough to tell it. Reason 5. When they're not sure if you can handle the truth. Scorpio doesn't just speak the truth. They sense the readiness of others to receive it. To Scorpio, truth isn't something you casually toss out like candy at a parade. It's a force, electric, radioactive, alchemical. If mishandled, it doesn't just hurt, it destroys. That's why Scorpio sometimes lies. Not because they don't have the truth, but because you're not ready to hold it. Not yet. Scorpios live at a vibrational depth where everything is interconnected. Pain, memory, love, betrayal, ancestral wounds, spiritual contracts. When they look at you, they don't just see your face. They see your shadows. And they know exactly how much light or how much truth you can handle without unraveling. Let me tell you a story. Her name was Sienna, a Scorpio woman in her early 30s. She had a best friend named Claire. Joyful, sensitive, pure-hearted. Claire was planning to marry a man that Sienna knew well, too well. He had once tried to pursue Sienna, months before he met Claire. Sienna had rejected him, but he never told Claire. Instead, he began courting her as if nothing had happened. Sienna was faced with a decision: tell Claire the truth and risk destroying her happiness, her trust, her peace of mind, or remain silent and preserve what stability she had. At one point, Claire asked Sienna directly, "Do you think he's the one?" Sienna paused. Her voice caught in her throat, and then she lied. "He makes you glow." That must mean something. It wasn't about cowardice. It was about reading the emotional bandwidth of the person in front of her. Claire wasn't ready. She was in love, yes, but also fragile, clinging to a vision of stability after years of abandonment issues. The truth in that moment would not have liberated her. It would have shattered her foundation, maybe permanently. That's how Scorpio moves. Like a storm wrapped in silk. They weigh psychological structures. They calculate energetic costs. They look at your emotional immune system before they inject the serum of truth. If they sense you will crumble, collapse, implode, they'll lie. Gently, even lovingly. Because to Scorpio, truth without preparation is violence. Lesson: truth is not always a gift. Sometimes it's a weapon. There's a belief in society, especially in Western culture, that honesty is always noble. Just be honest, we say. Tell it like it is. But Scorpio knows better. They know that truth is medicine, yes, but the wrong dose at the wrong time can become poison. That's why their silence or their gentle misdirection is not betrayal. It's spiritual timing. So if a Scorpio ever withheld something from you, ask yourself this: were they lying to manipulate? Or were they waiting, hoping that one day you'd be strong enough to face what they already knew? Because when the moment finally arrives, when they look you in the eye and do tell you the full truth, you'll know this: they didn't speak sooner, because they respected your soul too much to speak too soon. Reason 6. When they're creating distance without confrontation. When Scorpio starts to pull away, they don't slam doors. They don't make speeches. They don't start fights. They vanish, like mist when the sun rises. And when asked why, they'll often respond with a lie. Something like, "I've just been busy," or "I'm going through some things," or the classic, "It's not you, it's me." But here's the truth: Scorpio is one of the most confrontation-resistant signs in the zodiac. Not because they fear conflict, but because they understand the energetic cost of direct war. When Scorpio senses that a connection has become toxic, one-sided, manipulative, or simply no longer aligned with their soul, they don't explode. They detach. And yes, they'll lie if they have to. Let me tell you about Elijah, a Scorpio man in his late 20s. He had been friends with Mark since high school, but over the years, Mark became increasingly jealous, condescending, and dismissive of Elijah's growth. Every success Elijah shared was met with a joke. Every vulnerability with sarcasm. One day, Mark called and asked if Elijah wanted to catch up. Elijah replied, "I've just got a lot on my plate right now. Maybe another time." And he never called back. Mark didn't understand. He texted. He pushed. But Elijah never explained. He didn't expose Mark's behavior. He didn't demand an apology. He just left. Because Scorpio doesn't always need a dramatic ending. Sometimes they lie to avoid a storm. Not because they're weak, but because they've learned that not all battles are worth the fire. And when they've already emotionally detached, confrontation feels like resurrecting a corpse just to kill it again. To Scorpio, some relationships die in silence, and that silence is the closure. So they lie, not to manipulate, but to exit without destruction. Lesson: not all goodbyes come with an explanation. We live in a world that craves clarity. Tell me why, we demand. Give me closure. But Scorpio doesn't always offer that. Not because they're cruel, but because they've already said everything in their silence. They understand that some people don't deserve a front row seat to your evolution, that some bridges don't need burning, just quiet abandonment. If you've ever had someone drift away without a harsh word, just a soft fade, and you felt confused, maybe even angry, pause before you judge them. Because maybe, just maybe, they were a Scorpio. And maybe the lie they told was the kindest way they knew to let you go without turning your world into ashes. Reason 7. When they want to protect their power. Some people show their strength by speaking loudly. Scorpio shows theirs by saying nothing at all. In the world of Scorpio, knowledge is power, and power is best protected in silence. That's why Scorpios are extremely selective with what they reveal. They understand that once you give someone the full story, you've also given them the tools to manipulate you. So instead, Scorpio often lies, not to deceive, but to preserve their advantage. Because in their eyes, not everyone deserves access to your power. Let me tell you a story. Lena was a Scorpio entrepreneur, brilliant, intuitive, quietly successful. She had recently signed a major deal with an international firm. But when asked by friends how things were going, she downplayed everything. Oh, just staying busy. You know, same grind, different day. She wasn't lying to be humble. She was lying to protect the energy of what she was building. Lena had learned the hard way that revealing too much, too early, invited interference. Jealousy, sabotage, projection, unwanted opinions. In her world, privacy was sacred. And her greatest strength wasn't just what she accomplished, but how invisible her moves were until they became undeniable. That's the Scorpio way. When they lie, it's often a shield, a way of safeguarding the momentum of something still forming. An idea, a plan, a recovery, a new version of themselves. Until it's strong enough to stand alone, Scorpio keeps it hidden, even if that means saying, "I'm not really doing much these days." Don't be fooled. They're not being modest. They're being strategic. Lesson. Sometimes the lie is the lock that protects the treasure. In a world obsessed with oversharing, Scorpio teaches restraint. They understand something most people forget. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And when Scorpio lies, it's often a whisper meant to redirect attention away from their power source, away from the sacred thing they're protecting. A dream, a wound, a truth not ready to be touched. If you've ever hidden good news, held back from posting your success, or said, "I'm okay," when you were glowing inside, you've already walked in their footsteps. The difference is, Scorpio does it by design, because what they're building isn't just for the world, it's for destiny. And destiny needs silence to grow. Reason 8. When they're trying to avoid hurting you, there's a specific kind of lie that Scorpio tells, not to protect themselves, not to gain power, not even to test you, but simply to spare you. Because here's something most people don't understand about Scorpio. They feel everything, not just their own pain, but yours. And sometimes they see that you're already bleeding inside, so they choose not to add another wound. So they lie, gently, carefully, compassionately. Let me take you into the story of Malik, a Scorpio man in his early 40s, a mentor and quiet spiritual seeker. He was in a long-term relationship with Ava, a woman who adored him. But deep inside, Malik had already begun to drift. Not because of betrayal, not because of conflict, but because the soul connection had changed. He no longer felt aligned. But Ava, she still looked at him like he hung the stars. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sky turn gold, she asked, "Do you still love me the way you used to?" And Malik paused. He looked at her face, full of hope, so fragile in that moment. He saw the years, the dreams, the vulnerability, and he lied. Ido. Not because he was cruel, but because he knew that Ava wasn't ready. Not tonight. Not yet. That lie didn't come from cowardice. Came from timing. From reading someone's heart and choosing not to crush it under the weight of a truth they couldn't survive in that moment. Scorpio's lie in this case wasn't meant to drag on forever. It was a bridge, a way to protect Ava until the day came when the truth could be spoken without destroying everything. Lesson. Sometimes a lie is the softest way to say, "I care." This part of Scorpio is rarely acknowledged. People see their intensity, their silence, their control, but they miss their compassion. Because Scorpio has walked through fire, and they know what it's like to be burned by honesty that came too soon, too sharp, too carelessly. They remember. So they choose at times to withhold a truth, not to deceive but to delay the pain, to let you breathe a little longer, to let your soul build the strength it will one day need. And when the truth is finally spoken, it won't be cruel. It will be with reverence, with softness, with care. Because Scorpio doesn't just deliver truth. They escort it in like a priest bearing sacred news. And sometimes they wait until the temple is ready to receive it. Reason 9. When they're building an escape plan, Scorpio rarely runs. They retreat. And when they do, it's never loud. It's calculated, quiet, and wrapped in layers of silence. And yes, sometimes a lie. Because when a Scorpio feels emotionally cornered, when they sense danger, control, manipulation, or deep spiritual misalignment, they don't always confront it head-on. Sometimes they build an escape plan first. And while doing so, they lie. But not to be cruel. They lie to survive. Let me tell you about Cassie, a Scorpio woman in her late 30s, in a long-term relationship with a man named Troy. On the outside, everything looked fine. Photos, smiles, family dinners. But behind closed doors, Troy was emotionally unpredictable. Charming one moment, cutting the next. Never violent, but always destabilizing. Cassie didn't feel safe enough to confront him directly. Not yet. So when he asked, "Is everything okay between us?" she smiled. Of course. When he asked, "Do you want to go on that trip together next month?" she said, "I'd love to." But behind the scenes, she was applying for apartments, transferring funds, packing her emotional armor. She wasn't lying to stay in the relationship. She was lying to leave it safely. That's Scorpio's way. When they feel like they're being held in a psychological cage, they don't always scream for help. They study the locks. And until they're ready to walk away without chaos, they will play along, say what needs to be said, and plan every step with surgical precision. To some, this may seem deceptive, but to Scorpio, it's self-preservation. They've learned the hard way that leaving too early, too loud, too honest can sometimes backfire. It invites rage, manipulation, guilt. So instead, they exit the only way they know how. Quiet, strategic, and often already gone before you notice. Lesson: some lies aren't escape from you, they're protection for them. Not everyone can afford a clean, honest exit, especially when emotions are messy and power dynamics are complex. Scorpios know this. So they lie not to cheat, not to betray, but to protect their exit path, to secure their healing, to ensure that when they leave whole, not in pieces. If you've ever said, "I'm okay," while planning your escape behind the scenes, if you've ever smiled at someone you were afraid of just to get through one more day, then you've already spoken a Scorpio lie. And that doesn't make you weak. It means you were finding your way out. So if a Scorpio lies while slowly withdrawing, don't rush to call them heartless. They may be walking out with dignity, from a place where the truth would have only caged them tighter. Reason 10. When they're trying to protect a childlike part of themselves. Every Scorpio you meet carries something sacred inside them, a part of their soul untouched by the world. A childlike piece, pure, gentle, still believing in magic. But most people never see it, because Scorpio hides it, and sometimes they lie to protect it. This isn't the lie of deception, it's the lie of preservation. Because when Scorpio was younger, in childhood, adolescence, or early adulthood, someone likely betrayed that soft part of them, laughed at their dreams, mocked their emotions, used their vulnerability as a weapon. Since then, Scorpio learned, if I want that part of me to survive, I have to hide it from people who don't understand it. So they put on masks. They say things like, "I don't really care about that stuff," or "I don't get emotional like other people," or even, "I don't believe in love anymore." But deep inside they do. They care. They believe. They dream. Let me tell you about Jonah, a Scorpio man in his early 30s working in corporate finance. He was seen as intense, competitive, emotionally stoic. But what no one knew, Jonah wrote poetry, tender, vivid, mystical verses, late at night, in a leather notebook no one had ever seen. One evening, a coworker asked, "What do you do to blow off steam?" Jonah smiled. "Gym. That's about it." It was a lie, but not because he was ashamed, because he knew what would happen if they laughed, if they joked, if they made light of the one thing that kept him connected to his soul. That's the thing about Scorpio. They're not just hiding secrets. They're protecting the few parts of themselves that still believe the world can be beautiful. And those parts? They don't survive public ridicule. So Scorpio lies. Gently, strategically, not to close you out but to keep something pure from being broken. Lesson: not all lies hide shame, some hide treasure. In a culture that demands transparency, Scorpio reminds us, some truths are too tender to be exposed. The lie isn't always rejection. Sometimes it's an invitation to prove you're safe, that you can be trusted with something fragile, luminous, and rare. So if a Scorpio downplays their passion, shrugs off something they care deeply about, or pretends they don't feel as much as they do, pause. Look closer. Listen deeper. They may be waiting for you to earn the right to see what they've hidden. And if they ever hand it to you, their poem, their painting, their dream, their truth, understand this. They're not just showing you who they are. They're showing you who they used to be before the world hurt them. And there is no deeper honor. Reason 11. When they're testing if you deserve the truth. Scorpio doesn't hand out truth like candy. They guard it like treasure, and they test the people who come asking for it. Because to Scorpio, truth isn't just information. It's sacred, and it should only be revealed to those who have shown they can respect, protect, and carry it without turning it into a weapon. So yes, sometimes Scorpio will lie. Deliberately, calmly, and then they'll watch. Not to manipulate, but to measure your loyalty, your energy, your integrity. Let me give you a story. Kira, a Scorpio in her mid-30s, worked in the film industry. An environment filled with gossip, competition, and superficial charm. One day, a coworker, Amanda, asked her a seemingly innocent question. Did you really turn down that Netflix deal everyone's talking about? Kira had turned it down, but for reasons deeply personal. The content violated a creative boundary tied to her family's trauma. Instead of explaining, she responded, "Oh no, that deal was never real. Just rumors." A lie, but intentional. Why? Because Kira knew Amanda wasn't asking out of curiosity. She was collecting ammunition. If Kira had shared the truth, it could have become fuel for whispers, distortions, judgment. So she tested. She planted a misdirection and waited. Within a week, she heard Amanda sharing the rumor with others, mocking her ambition. Kira didn't confront. She noted it silently and sealed her vault tighter than ever. This is how Scorpio moves. They don't just offer truth to anyone. They observe who honors silence, who guards small details, who doesn't twist the truth behind their back. Only after you pass those tests, only after you prove that your soul can hold the weight of real truth, will Scorpio give it to you. Whole, raw, unfiltered. And by then, it's not just a conversation. It's a consecration. Lesson: truth isn't a gift. It's a trust. And Scorpio doesn't trust lightly. In a world where people crave transparency, Scorpio reminds us, you don't owe truth to everyone who demands it, because not all truth heals. In the wrong hands, truth becomes gossip, judgment, control. Scorpio knows this because they've been burned by people who begged for honesty, only to misuse it. So they test. And if you fail, you may never even know. You'll be kept at surface level, forever wondering why the conversation with Scorpio never goes deep. But if you pass, they'll open a door that few ever see. And once inside, you'll realize their honesty isn't brutal. It's beautiful, because they only share it with those who can hold it without breaking it. Reason 12. When they're hiding the fact that they're hurting too. You ask a Scorpio how they're doing and they say, "I'm fine." You ask again and they smile. "It's nothing. Just tired." But if you could look beneath the surface, past the armor, the silence, the mystery, you'd find something they've hidden from almost everyone. They're hurting too. Scorpio lies in these moments not because they're cold, but because they're protecting their wound. To Scorpio, pain is sacred. It's not for display. It's not for pity. It's not for anyone to dissect or define. It belongs to them entirely, utterly, intimately. So they wrap it in silence, in denial, sometimes even in a smile. Let me share the story of Rochelle, a Scorpio woman, 45, teacher by profession, warrior by life. Years ago, she lost her sister in a car accident. Since then, she carried the grief like a hidden scar beneath her ribs. She went to work every day, gave lectures, laughed with her students, mentored young women, but when asked how she was coping, "I've moved on," she said. That was a lie, not to deceive others, but to keep her grief from being poked, prodded, or misunderstood. Because Scorpio knows that some kinds of pain don't need fixing. They need space to breathe, to rest, to be held in silence, like an ancient prayer whispered only to the stars. And when Scorpio lies about their own pain, it's not because they lack vulnerability. It's because their vulnerability is too real to share with those who haven't earned it. Lesson: some lies are a cry for help, spoken in disguise. When Scorpio says, "I'm okay," sometimes they're testing whether you'll accept it at face value, or whether you'll stay, listen deeper, and prove that you can hold space without pushing. Because Scorpio doesn't need someone to solve their pain. They need someone who can witness it without fear. Someone who knows how to sit in the dark without needing to turn on the light. So if a Scorpio lies about how they feel, don't rush to expose the truth. Sit beside them. Let your presence say what words cannot. Because the strongest thing you can do for a Scorpio is not demand the truth, but create a space safe enough for it to come out on its own. Closing. What Scorpio's lies really teach you is, so now you've seen it all. 12 reasons, 12 masks, 12 quiet battles happening behind Scorpio's calm gaze and cryptic answers. And maybe you've realized something unexpected. Scorpio doesn't lie because they're fake. They lie because their truth, is too real to give away carelessly. Each reason wasn't about deception. It was about protection, of energy, of innocence, of sacred timing, of emotional safety, of their own soul, and sometimes of yours. Because here's the thing Scorpio teaches us that few dare to admit. Truth is powerful, but power must be earned. And sometimes the lie is simply a bridge, a shield, pause button, until the moment is right, until the person is safe, until the soul is ready. So before you judge a Scorpio for their silence, their mystery, or their misdirection, ask yourself, have you ever lied to protect a dream? To buy yourself time? To test if someone would still choose you even without the full story? Then maybe you've walked their path more than you think. The bigger lesson: lies, like truth, carry spiritual weight. Not all honesty heals. Not all silence is rejection. And not all lies are betrayal. Sometimes we lie to hold a cracked heart together, to protect a childlike dream, to delay a goodbye we're not yet ready to say out loud. Scorpio teaches us that emotional mastery isn't just about speaking the truth. It's about knowing when to speak, who to speak to, and why some truths are better whispered than shouted. Now it's your turn. Have you ever told one of these kinds of lies? Not to hurt, but to protect? Drop it in the comments. Let's talk.
No judgment.
Just raw, real, soul-deep reflection. And if this video helped you see Scorpio, or yourself, in a new light, subscribe to the Path to Buddha Wisdom now. Because this isn't just a channel. It's a space for emotional truth and spiritual transformation. And Scorpio? They've been waiting for someone like you to finally understand what their silence was saying all along.